Haven't I commanded you? Haven't I commanded you? Be strong and courageous.
Hello and welcome back to Teaching Through the Bible as we continue through the book of Joshua. Now in this outline for this book, we have covered the first two sections, the crossing over of the Jordan River, the taking of the land, and now we're going to dividing of the land. So as a reminder, what this map looks like that we're looking at here. We're looking at the Mediterranean Sea, we're looking at the Sea of Galilee, we're looking at the Jordan River, and we're looking at the Dead Sea down here. Now, in this map, and honestly, you probably should make it a little bit bigger so that we can draw some more in there because we're going to need some more details. Let's see, do it like this. All right, so in this map, you may have been looking at the dividing section already. You may have noticed we're getting that picture through a lot of words, through a number of chapters. And we're going to get to see what the tribes' boundaries are supposed to be like. Now, before we get into that, we have just a couple little notes. If you read through this, you may see the Sea of Kinnereth, and that probably does not sound familiar, but another name it goes by that may sound familiar to you is the Sea of Galilee. That's what that's talking about. When you read that, it's talking about the Sea of Galilee. Also, you may see something that says Ein Rogel, or it's E-N and then some other name. This first part, Ein, means spring. So the spring of Rogel. Something like that. So when you see there's a number of names, it's the spring of such and such. And that's why you have so many instances of this as the first part of a name. And then as we look at the map itself, though, what does that look like? Now, if you are doing this as a class, it's a good option to study this, to know the map, not even just the bodies of water and the tribes, but even more details, because that will really help you get an idea of what's going on geographically, how things kind of make sense when you know where people are or where they're located, the battles are, things like that. Stuff can seem to click a little bit more, I think, if you can visualize kind of where it is on a map rather than just some random name of some random place. So here we've got, and this is a very rough drawing. You can just Google 12 Tribes of Israel map or something like that and should be able to pull something up. If you have a study Bible, you probably got a map of the 12 tribes there. But roughly, you've got Judah here, and then you've got, on this other side, you've got like these 3 or 2.5 other tribes. You have Reuben and Gad and 1/2 of the tribe of Manasseh. Above Judah, you have Benjamin, you have Dan, you have Ephraim, you have the rest of that other half of the tribe of Manasseh. And then you got the 4 up here. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4. Naphtali is the one up top here to the left of the Sea of Galilee. And then you have Asher on the side on the coast here. And then you have Issachar and Zebulun. Now, this is all in detail in these chapters we're covering today. It gives a lot of details of what are the exact boundaries. So this is essentially a lot of like lists, geographical markers, boundaries for the land. And really, you may not have even known this was in here because this is not the part of Joshua that people remember or that people go over. You have the crossing over section. That's the spies with Rahab. People know that. The taking section, the Battle of Jericho. People know that. The serving part. That's the last couple chapters. And that's the famous line you probably have seen posted up on someone's wall or something like that. They have this, as for me and my house, we will serve Yahweh. That's that line that Joshua says as he's speaking to the people of Israel. Or it may incorrectly say, serving the Lord. The difference between Lord and Yahweh. We've talked about that before, but you may get that Bible verse on, a little cup mug thing for Christmas from a relative or something. But that verse comes from this last section, the serve section. Divide, it's skipped over a lot. And it's really understandable that that's the case. It can be kind of hard to get through chapter after chapter after chapter after chapter of things that are just telling you where is this boundary and this boundary and that boundary. And you say, what's the point? But remember, all of the Bible is God's word. All of it is important, and we can learn from all of it. Sometimes it's harder to learn from certain parts than from others, but that doesn't mean we can't learn from it. So we have here with this a map. I'm going to put in here right about there. We got Shiloh. That's important because that is where the tabernacle is at this point. Because remember, they came up from this way. They crossed over here. We got Jericho and the territory of Benjamin right there. The border of Benjamin and Judah, we have Jerusalem, where the temple will eventually be. But for right now, Shiloh, that is where God's people can corporately worship and do their sacrifices. As we look at the tribes, as we look at the chapters here, what's one thing we always want to do when we see this list of tribes? We always want to see what's the list, what's the order, who's put in, who's left out, what's the order of the tribes listed. This is going to be a little different because these 2.5 tribes, Reuben, Gad, half tribe of Manasseh, they've already got their land, so they don't really have the same kind of attention to them as the other ones do in this section, and that makes sense. But we can still look at this list, see who's in there, who's not in there. One thing to notice is when we're looking, if we flip to chapter 13, where this starts, chapter 13 gives us this indication that they still have work to do. The land has been taken to a degree, but they haven't wiped 100% of the people out. There's still work to be done. But then when we get to this inheritance on this side of the river, it begins not with a tribe. It begins with Caleb getting land. So Caleb gets land, and then it talks about tribes, and then at the end, we flip all the way over, keep going to the end of chapter 19. Joshua gets land. Verse 49, when they had finished distributing the several territories of the land as inheritances, the people of Israel gave an inheritance among them to Joshua, the son of Nun. So it's bookended by Joshua and Caleb, the two faithful spies from back in the book of Numbers who trusted Yahweh, who followed him, the only ones from their generation still alive, the only ones from their generation who could cross that river. Everyone else is dead. But they, you could say the remnant of that generation, they were faithful, and they were able to cross over and receive the promised reward, the promised land that God had said, hey, this is what I'm going to give you. This is what we're going for. And they did. And they are bookending this list. So Caleb, first of all, what's going on with him? He, just like everyone else, still has some work to do. Still has to go and actually defeat everyone that's in his territory that he's going to get. And his territory that he's going to get, which is in Judah, his bit there, he's got to go defeat some people. And he says, I can do it. Now, why does he say, yeah, I'm going to be able to do this? It's not because he thinks he's great. It's not because he thinks he's strong. It's not because he thinks, oh, these guys are pushovers. It's because of what he's already seen. Because remember, the theme of this book fulfillment of Yahweh's promises. Some of that has already taken place. And God has given some promises that he has fulfilled. He's given some promises that are in the process of being fulfilled, other promises that have not yet been fulfilled. But he's given this promise. And so Caleb trusts that he's going to get that land. And so he's looking back at these other promises. He mentions, hey, God has always been faithful throughout my life. I've seen him fulfill promises, and I believe he will continue to fulfill the promises. So he trusts Yahweh, and he goes and he takes the land. All of this from this theme that we should get, and this is something that we could really learn from ourselves, right? We can really easily separate what's in the Bible and what's in our lives, modern day, because in the Bible, you have something like the walls of Jericho falling down. You know, like God just comes in like a wrecking ball. Like, that's amazing. And that's easy to call that miraculous and say, yeah, they can look at the miraculous things and then they can trust God. But I haven't had anything miraculous like that happen in my life. But if we really are going to be honest looking back at our lives, we could really all look back and see things that have happened in our lives where God has been faithful to us, where God has directed us in certain ways or away from certain ways or protected us in certain situations. We can look back and say, God's been faithful, God's taken care of me, and then trust that he will continue. And so that right there, Caleb's doing that, we can do that. Caleb starts this off on a high note. And we continue with this theme, fulfillment of Yahweh's promises. We saw in this section also, in these chapters, it also mentioned Zelophehad's daughters. And we talked about that a couple of times already. They've been mentioned before, starting in the book of Numbers, and I can link that below. But these daughters, they wouldn't typically be getting land. But in this case, there's no sons for the land. And every family was promised to get land, right? So if every family is promised to get land, what is going to happen here? Well, they do solve this. This has already been addressed. But now we're seeing that, yes, in fact, they did get the land. Like, this is just reiterating to us that promise was fulfilled. That family, every family gets their inheritance. And that family did as well. But all of the promises is not always something that we'd think of as positive. I challenge you to figure out which of these tribes actually gets a judgment on them. Just read through the chapters and see, can you figure out which chapter and which tribe is it where God's setting up a judgment to be coming. If you need a hint, you can read Genesis 49, and that will give you a good hint. So if you're going to do that, go ahead and pause and then play when you found it, or when you need some direction on that. But that's going to be Shimeon. Now notice I didn't draw Shimeon in here. Shimeon is kind of in the middle of Judah. Now, that's significant. Now, we might read right through that along with all these other guys, like, oh, they're getting this land, they're getting this land, here's their boundary, here's their boundary. Shimeon is the only one mentioned to be in the midst of another tribe. Now, Shimeon does have its own section, its own land for now, but if you go back to Genesis 49, we see Jacob prophesying essentially about his sons, the 12 sons that become the 12 tribes of Israel. And it says, Shimeon and Levi are brothers. This is 49 verse 5. Weapons of violence are their swords. Let my soul come not into their counsel. O my glory, be not joined to their company. For in their anger they killed men, and in their willfulness they hamstrung oxen. Cursed be their anger, for it is fierce, and their wrath, for it is cruel. I will divide them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel. So here we have Shimeon is going to be dispersed. Later on, we are going to see that is the case, that does happen. Where, as we continue to read, we're going to get to a part where there is a splitting, where basically you have that right there. You essentially have this is a divider, and you have the northern kingdom of Israel and the southern kingdom of Judah. And it always says 2 tribes in Judah and the rest in Israel. And the 2 tribes, sometimes it says Judah and Levi, because the Levites, even though they are kind of dispersed everywhere, have different towns, they, as a tribe, side with the Davidic king in the southern kingdom. Other times it says Judah and Benjamin, because those are the 2 tribes that are there, right? But there's no mention of Shimeon, who is clearly down here with Judah. And it's not like there's this pocket that's just the northern kingdom but separated. They have been dispersed and kind of absorbed into the tribe of Judah. So we see that that's setting up, just being in the middle of that tribe is already setting them up for that to happen, for that curse to be fulfilled. Because whether it's positively or negatively, fulfillment of Yahweh's promises, right? That's going to happen. So we see we're starting to see the cracks of failure, being afraid of the chariots. These other guys are not like Caleb. They don't say, well, God promised I can do this, so here we go. Right? They say, oh, they got chariots. We can't do that. We can't fight against those guys. Don't forget about the fact that, they just saw, the Jericho's walls come crumbling down. They're still, oh, chariots. Can't handle that, right? We just defeated this giant fortress, but chariots, oh no. Or when they're supposed to take the land. Now, notice I said down here was Dan. But you want to know where we have this city up here called Dan in Naphtali's territory. You know why? It's because they said, you know what, that looks kind of difficult. Why don't we just press the easy button? They found an isolated area, peaceful looking people, and so we're going to go take that over because that'll be much easier than dealing with this land down here. So they totally rejected what God gave them and went and kind of took out of Naphtali's area. So kind of on the border of Naphtali's area. So that's we're seeing that. We're seeing that these people, instead of taking over like they're supposed to, it says, well, they couldn't drive them out, but they submitted them to forced labor. They forced labor upon them, upon these local other nations. And which you may say, oh, that maybe that's good, maybe that's bad. But there's kind of a few different ways to look at it. And we're going to talk more about that next time to kind of wrap up that part of it and continue in to the last part in the divide section and talking about the Levites, because of course they didn't get land, and we'll talk about that. Thank you for watching that video. I hope that it helped you learn a little bit more about the Bible today. And if you'd like to continue to learn more about the Bible, then we have plenty of other videos on the channel. And if this has been helpful for you, then you can always let me know by subscribing to the channel. And hopefully I'll be able to continue to help you learn even more about God's Word. Thanks.